Hi everyone, Victor here again, and in today's lesson, we're going to be deploying our first mini project. And I wanted to do this topic later on, but because I need to explain some other concepts, some other Kubernetes, OpenShift objects and resources, hence we're going to learn this object by deploying this mini project. And this mini project is simply the deployment of two-tier applications, which are the MySQL database server and PHPMyAdmin. I chose to deploy these two applications because I remember those years. Those years I usually do web design with content management system, WordPress to be precise, so I could get some cash to survive. I'll just go to the control panel and then open the PHPMyAdmin application to manage my SQL database for some website I designed those years. And it's actually interesting, so that's why I chose to deploy these two applications. All right. So in this lesson, we're going to learn the following. We're going to learn how to deploy multi-containers application, which of course we have the MySQL and PHPMyAdmin. And we're also going to learn how to deploy secret, how to create secret. We're going to also learn how to create config map. In this project, I'm going to be acting as the Scrum Master and the product owner. I'm just kidding. So here's the plan. We're going to deploy my SQL database server first, and because we don't want to expose our database to the outside world, we are going to create an internal service for MySQL, after which we will deploy PHPMyAdmin front-end application that we're going to use to manage MySQL. And since PHPMyAdmin is front-end and we need to interact with it from the browser, we're going to create an external service for PHPMyAdmin. However, PHPMyAdmin and MySQL will communicate with each other by using the internal service that has been created for MySQL, and then we will create a database from PHPMyAdmin to test the deployment. In all of this, you will learn what secret and config map are and how to use them. So let's start with understanding what secret and config map are. These two objects or resources are similar to each other, but first, let's look at what secret is. Secret, from its word, is simply secret. Okay, the secret object, from its word, basically holds secret or sensitive information that you don't want to expose to everyone, or rather the cluster users. The secret information could be usernames, passwords, SSH keys, or sensitive configuration file, etc. So the way it works is that the secret resources is going to be created separately, either by using the command line or YAML. Then the application pod or any other resource can reference the secret, which basically means that what needs to be referenced needs to be created first. In other words, the secret which is going to be referenced by other resources needs to be created first before creating other resources. So let's say you have applications like MongoDB, MySQL, or even some other applications that needs to be deployed with sensitive information such as the SSH keys, sensitive configuration files, usernames, passwords. The ideal thing is that this information are protected. So what you would do is to create a secret and put this sensitive information in the secret, then reference or point the applications to the secret. The application pod or other resources can reference the secret basically in two ways. One way is to add the secret as environment variables, for example, in the application pod, and The other way is to add it as a volume inside of the pod. So let's see how this can be done while we're deploying our mini project. The first thing we're going to do is to create the MySQL pod. So we need to create the MySQL application. And to do that, I can say kubectl create deployment. I can call this MySQL, and of course, image is going to be MySQL. I want the latest image. And now you can see that this has been created. So if I do kubectl get pod, you can see that container is being created. It's saying container creating. If I do get ports again, I can see error here. You can see that the pod is not coming up. And if I check, you can see that the pod is not coming up. So if I also want to check, I can say kubectl describe pod. I can just pick this pod here. So you can see that the image was successfully pulled. However, this image is not starting. This is because we haven't added the environment variable for my SQL deployment. You see, some applications need environment variables before they can be deployed, especially most databases, and my SQL fall in this category. You can't just create my SQL pod without adding the necessary environment variable. Let's see how this container can be used. If I go to up.docker.com and I search for my SQL, so I can just press enter. You can see the official image here. So I'm going to click here and you can see the information about my SQL. This is the name of the image and this is how you can use Docker to pull the image. And if you scroll down, you will see other information. You would see what my SQL is, how to use this image, blah blah blah. But what I'm looking for is environment variables. So if I scroll down here, you can see environment variables here, and you can see that we have different environment variables. So if you look at this environment variable, which is my SQL underscore root underscore password, it's saying that this variable is mandatory and specifies the password that will be set for my SQL root, and which is true. I mean, you can't just deploy a database in my SQL database without specifying a password. How are you going to be able to log in if you don't specify a password while you're installing your database server? And that is why this variable is mandatory. You can see other variables. You can see my SQL underscore database. This one is optional. So this one allows you to create another extra user while deploying your database. You can see other variables that are optional here. However, this one is mandatory. So let's create this pod again. And this time around, I'll be using the YAML configuration file to create this pod. So I already have a configuration file I have created here. So if I do vi my SQL deploy.yml, that's the configuration file I have here. So if you look at this critically, just like I have explained, we have the API version. Oops. We have the API version, right? We have the kind, which is deployment. We have the metadata, which is the name of the deployment, which is my SQL. We have spec. We have under spec, I have selector, match labels, match which is going to match the pod I want to create. So this of course connects the pod and the deployment together and also connects service together, just like I have explained before in our previous lesson. So I have the template here, this is the information about the pod I'm creating. And under the template, I have labels, which is app MySQL spec. So under spec, I have containers. The image I'm going to be pulling is the latest image because I did not add any tag. So it's going to be my SQL. The name of the image, the name of the container is going to be my SQL. The environment variable here is what I'm going to add for the environment variable. So I'm going to be adding the mandatory environment variable just like we saw, which is the my SQL root password. And I'm going to be adding a value of password. So this is going to be the password for root for my SQL. And I also chose to add some other environment variables such as my SQL database, which is going to be DB1. And also I chose to add another one, which is my SQL user, which is DB user. And I also chose to add another one, which is my SQL password, and the value is also password. So this is just a simple YAML configuration file for my SQL. So I'm just going to create this here. So I'm going to delete the first one we created called my deployment, sorry, deployment, my SQL. So that deployment has been deleted. So what I'm going to do now is to use this configuration file, apply file, file my SQL deploy.yaml. So now you can see that the my SQL container or pod has been created. So if I do kubectl get pods, you can now see that this pod is running because I have added the environment variable. If I say get pods again, you can see that this container is already running and we don't have issues with this container. And like I have said while explaining what secret is, you wouldn't want to expose my SQL root password, right? You wouldn't want to expose this password in your configuration file. I mean, it is not ideal to do that. And there are also other information you would not want to expose in your configuration file. You should protect sensitive information such as this. So that's why we need secret object to be able to protect information like this. So what we're going to do now is to delete this deployment, and we're going to create secret so that we will not have this information here in the configuration file. So we'll create the secret object somewhere else so as to protect our information, and it will not be available for just anyone to see, because anyone can just review and check your YAML configuration file. So let's delete this. I'm going to delete this. So I'm just going to say kubectl delete file MySQL deploy.yaml. So you can see that this deployment has been deleted. So let me just try and expand this a bit. Oops, try and expand. All right, so this deployment has been deleted. What we're going to do now is to create a secret first before creating the deployment, because the deployment is going to reference the secret. And we have types of secret. So if you look at the Kubernetes documentation, you can see the different types of secret we have. This is also applicable in OpenShift as well. So we have the opaque, we have this account token, we have Docker CFG, we have basic auth. So this opaque is just for user is a user defined secret. It's the most commonly used type of secret. This is also commonly used as well, credentials for basic authentication. But we're going to be creating the opaque type of secret in our case here. So I already have a YAML configuration file for the secret I created. So let me just look at it. So this is my SQL secret.yml. So this is the YAML configuration file for the secret. And if you look at this is of course the API version, and this is the kind, and the kind is secret, and the metadata, which is the name of the secret. So I have the name of the secret under the metadata section here, which is my SQL-secret. And the type of secret is opaque, like I've mentioned. And I also have data under the secret. So the first data here is my SQL root password, and this is the password. So the password has to be base 64 encrypted. So I'm going to show you shortly how I encrypted the password. And I also have another data, which is my SQL username. This is also encrypted. And I also have another data, which is my SQL password, and this is also encrypted. To encrypt a password, so let me just open another terminal here. Okay, so here, to encrypt a password, I can just, let me bring this here. So I can just use the echo command. So I'm gonna say echo for password. I use the password. So this is the password I want to use, and I'm going to make it base 64 encrypted. So it's gonna be base 64. Oops. This needs to be in inverted comma as well. So you can see that I have encrypted this password, and that's why I just copied this password to my SQL root password here. So that's what I did. And for this username, for the username, you can just use any name you wish to use. I can use DB user1, for example, DB user1, and then look at the encryption he gave to me. Apparently, I have forgotten the username I used here. Anyway, so you can use any username here. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it here. So I know that we're using the user1. So I'm just going to edit here. I'm going to paste it here. Okay, so this is fine. Let me just be sure that I have the indentations correctly set, because indentations matters in YAML. Okay, so now that we have the secret, I'm going to create the secret. So let me be sure that I don't have that deployment here any longer. All right, so for secret, I can just say kubectl apply file my SQL secret.yaml. So you can see that the secret has been created. And if I do kubectl get secret, you can see that I have the secret called my SQL secret being created. If I want to get more, of course, you can see that we have 3 data, and the type of secret is opaque. So if I want to get more information about the secret, I can just say kubectl get kubectl describe rather my SQL secret my SQL kubectl describe secret my SQL secret. So you can see the information about the secret here. You can see that we have the name of the secret, the namespace, the type is opaque, and this is the data we have in the secret. So now in the configuration file for the deployment, we're going to reference the secret that we just created. So I already have a configuration file for that too. So let me show you. So if I say vim MySQL deploy secret.yml. So this is the configuration file I have for that. So here I can, let me check something here. All right. So here you can see, of course, we have the API version, we have the kind metadata, spec, template, and this is how you're going to reference a secret from the configuration file of a deployment or a pod. So here, when you get to the environment variable here, like I said, you can reference a secret using environment variable, or you can attach the secret to the pod as a volume, as a persistent volume. But in this case, we're going to look at that later. But right now, we're going to be looking at how to include the secret as an environment variable inside of your deployment. So here you can see that when you go to the environment variable, then the name, of course, which is the name of the environment variable, and you need to put this parameter, which is value from, then the secret, you're going to be referencing a secret key followed by the name here, which is the name of the secret, and the name of the secret is my SQL secret. Don't forget that when we did kubectl get secret, we got my SQL secret. So we're using this secret, which is my SQL secret, and the key, we're using the first key. This is the environment variable, and this is the value, and we're referencing the value in this key, which is my SQL dash root dash p. So let me just drag this here so we can see it. So you can see that we're referencing here the key here, which is my SQL here, and we're going to be referencing the same key, which is here, my SQL. So this is the key. And also for the other one, we have another one, which is my SQL username. So if you come down here, you can see that we have the environment variable here, which is my SQL user, and we're going to be referencing my SQL username. So it follows the same process: name, value from, secret key reference. We're going to be referencing this secret, and this is the key. And also the third one is my SQL password environment variable, and value from, we have the secret key reference, and we're going to be referencing the key here, and of course they must all have the name of the secret, and this is the port of the container. So we're going to be using this file, YAML file, to create our deployment, and you can see now that we don't have the secret information, our sensitive information in this YAML file anymore. So which means that if a senior developer or whatsoever developer, junior developer or whosoever or anybody wants to check or review your YAML configuration file, they won't have to, see the necessary and sensitive information in this file because you have put them in the secret. And also, I'm going to be dropping the link to this documentation in the description section below so that in case you want to easily copy and paste this, all our YAML configuration files, you can just easily do copy and paste instead of typing it one by one. So I'm going to also drop the link to that documentation in the description box below. So since we have our YAML file prepared, what we're going to do now is to create this file. So I'm going to, of course, we're going to confirm again, kubectl get deployment, just to see that we don't have any deployment, but we have our secret that we're going to be referencing, and then I'm going to say kubectl apply, do I have here, apply my SQL deploy secret.yml, And then you can see that this pod has been created, the deployment has been created. So if I do kubectl get pods, so you can see now that the pod is running and we don't have any issue. So if I keep saying kubectl get pods, you can see that our MySQL database server is running. Now that we have MySQL deployed, what we're going to do next is to create an internal service for MySQL. And to do that, I already have a YAML configuration file for that too as well. So I'm going to say vi MySQL. It should be in service.yml. So if you look at this as well, of course, you would have your API version, your kind, which is service, the metadata, the name of the service is MySQL, under spec, the selector is also MySQL, and for port, under the port, you can see that I'm going to be using um, port 3306. I'm going to be exposing this to the target port 3306 as well. And I'm also going to be using the TCP protocol. So this is so since I did not specify the type of service, so by default, it's going to create a cluster IP, which is the internal service for us. So now that we have this here, I can just apply this configuration first. I can say kubectl apply file my SQL service for YML. So this service has been created. So if I do kubectl get service, you can see that we have my SQL service being created. So that we have the MySQL application running, and we also have my SQL service. So the next thing we're going to do now is to create rather PHPMyAdmin pod. So to create PHPMyAdmin pod, let's look at Docker Hub again, and let's search for PHPMyAdmin. So let's see how we're going to use this container. So this container image. So if I scroll PHPMyAdmin, so if I click here, you can see that we have information about this application, and I'm looking for environment variables. So here I have different environment variables, and this here PMA underscore host is going to define my host name for my SQL server, which we've just created. And if I scroll up, let's see something again. Using with external server, so PMA underscore host. All right. Let me scroll down a bit. So I'm looking for another variable. I'm actually looking for a variable here, which is, where is this variable? Okay, so I'm looking for variable the MySQL underscore root underscore password. So this is the root password for my SQL server. So we're going to use this variable, this one, and this one to point to my SQL that we've created. I already have a YAML file for this as well for the PHPMyAdmin. So if I say vi PHPMyAdmin deploy.yml, so this is the configuration, the YAML configuration file for PHPMyAdmin. Of course, your API version, your kind, metadata, So when you get to the container section, which is the spec, and for spec we have containers, and for environment variable, so I'm going to be using the environment variable, which is my SQL root password, which will connect, and this is the value, which would connect to our MySQL database. And also, I'm also going to be using the variable PMA on the underscore host, which is also going to connect to the SQL database server, and we're going to be using the value MySQL. So this is just the name of the service. So the name of the service is the value for the MySQL host. And you can see as well that I'm exposing a secret here too, which, like I've said, is not ideal. So I'm going to correct this. And for this second environment variable, um, you know that I can easily put it somewhere else just to make it centralized. And this takes us to what config map is. So config map is similar to secret. The difference is that the secret is used to store sensitive information, while config map is used to store non-sensitive information. Both objects or resources are used to store external configuration that other resources can reference. So these resources can be shared across rather other resources. So therefore, I'm going to create a config map object and then put in this environment variable in that config map so that in case if we have any other application that needs to connect to this MySQL using this environment variable, we can just easily point the application to that config map. So that's why you need to always, look for a way to make things easier when doing deployment. And that is why we have config map as an object that's been, provided for us. So what I'm going to do now is to make sure that I point this environment variable to the secret that we've created. And I'm also going to create a config map so that I can put in this environment variable in that config map. So let's create a config map. So I already have a YAML file for that as well. So if I do vi my SQLs my SQL config map the YML. So it is similar. Config map, like I said, is similar to secret. And if you look at the YAML file, you can also see that we have API version, kind, config map, metadata. That's the name of the config map, which is my SQL config map data. So a config map, we did not put type because we don't have a type for config map. And for data, we just going to be putting one data, which is my SQL underscore host. And this is the service for my SQL. This is the internal service that we created. So it's just going to be, we're just going to be connecting to the PHPMyAdmin is going to be connecting to my SQL by using this service that we've created. So now I can create this config map. So if I do kubectl apply my SQL config map.yaml. So you can see that this config map has been created. So if I do kubectl get config map, you can see that we have the config map being created, which is my SQL underscore config map, and I have one data in that config map. So if I also want to know more about that config map, I can easily do kubectl describe config map and this config map. So I would get more information about that config map. So now that we've created our config map, then we can now recreate our YAML configuration file, which I have also done here. I have the YAML file here. So if I do vi phpMyAdmin deploy secret YAML. So this is the new YAML file. This is how it should really look like. So if you come to just as usual, API kind, blah, blah, blah. And if you come here, you can see that under our environment variable here, we have the name of the environment variable, and this is a secret, right? So this is a secret that we're going to be referencing. And for config map, of course, as I have the name of the environment variable and value from, so you see that it's taking almost a similar approach. So instead of using the secret key ref, we're using the config map key ref. So we're referencing this config map. So this is the name of the config map, and this is the key that we're referencing. So let me just open it somewhere else so we can see it. So for the config map, you can see that this is what we're referencing. All right. So now that I have this YAML file being prepared, I can I can just create the PHPMyAdmin using this YAML file. So let's just save this, and now I can say kubectl apply file PHPMyAdmin deploy secret YAML. So now you can see that this pod has been created. So if I do kubectl get pod, so I'm sure that it's still trying to pull the image. So it's saying container creating. So I can just say watch container is still creating. So let's just wait till the container is being created. So another thing I can do is I can say kubectl get php admin. So let me just copy the name of the pod here. Oops, get pod, or rather describe pod. So we can see that the image is still being pulled. So we can see that it's still being pulled. So if I say, let me just clear my screen. Oops, just clear my screen. So if I say kubectl get pod again, or pods, well, my cluster is unstable for now. So I'm just going to wait till this gets stable again. So my cluster actually crashed, so I just reprovision it again. So let's continue. Maybe space, resources and all of that. So if I do kubectl get ports now, so you can see that I have the pod running now. That's the PHPMyAdmin pod running now. So now that we have this pod running, if I do kubectl get ports all wide, so to get a wider information, so the next thing we need to do now is to create an external service for this PHPMyAdmin pod. And I have that service here too as well. So if I do PHPMyAdmin service.yml, so this is the configuration file for the service. And as usual, API version kind service, metadata for port 8080 protocol TCP, and this is the type of the external service, which is the node port. And now that I have this file ready, and I can just say kubectl apply file phpMyAdmin service.yml. So if I do kubectl get service, so now I have the service being created, and I have our ports are still running. So it remains a service here, which is our internal service. I can't find it here. So I'm just going to reprovision that service again. I told you that the cluster crashed, so I had to just bring it up back. Oh, I know the service is my SQL service.yml. So if I do kubectl get service, so I have the service now, kubectl get config map, of course. Should have this too, then get secret. All right, so we have the service for the PHPMyAdmin. The service is running now, and what we can now do is to test our deployment. So we're done deploying. We've created secrets. We've created config map. We know what these objects are, And now, so I can just do minikube IP. So with minikube IP, I can go to my browser to see, to test for this port. So if I do kubectl get service again, get service. So on the browser, I can just put in the IP for the minikube, and this is 332. Let me confirm that again. 32296. So 32296. All right, so this is good. So you can see now that we can access our front end application, which is the PHPMyAdmin, and the default username is root, and our password is that's PA55WORD. That's the password we set. And if I try to log in, let's see if you can log into our database. Wow, so this is cool. We can log in into the database using the PHPMyAdmin. So you can see that we have how many databases? One, two, three, four databases. And I can, do whatever thing I want to do. I can query database. You can see the user that we created, which is the DB user one. You can see different information here. So this is what we're going to do as well on the terminal. So I can say minikube IP again. On the terminal, I can just say SSH docker at the IP 192.168.39.238 TC user. So I am on the minikube node itself. This shouldn't be a new thing, because we've done this in one of our previous lessons. You know how to do this already. So let's just look for the MySQL container that is running here on the Docker runtime. So I'm just going to say my SQL. So you can see my SQL here. So I'm going to enter the container itself. So I can just say Docker exec IT interactive shell. So I can use the container ID or the container name. So I can just say sh shell. So I'm in the container itself. So now I can do my SQL root, user root, password, which is password. This is our password. Then protocol, TCP protocol. Then host is going to be local host. So now you can see that I am in the database. Yeah, I'm in database. So now I can just say show databases, show databases. So you can see our database here. So what I'm going to do now again is to go back to my PHPMyAdmin. I'm going to come to databases here. So I'm just going to create a new database. I'm going to say technique test here. So I'm going to create this database. So you can see now that I have the technique test database being created. So if I come back here, let's just go back here. If I do show databases again here, so you can see now that we have technique test here. So meaning that our configuration is right. I'm going to exit out of here and exit again. So I just want to quickly do something. I want to delete this guy. Kubectl delete file, my SQL deploy secret YAML. So I have deleted the MySQL container, the MySQL application. So I'm going to create this application again. So I just want to show you what some of the things I've been discussing. So it's going to be apply. Oops, apply. So I have the container being created. So let me see, kubectl get code. So it's still trying to come up. So the container is running now. So since it is running now, if I come back here and let me just refresh, I recreated this, so it's going to, of course, it's going to log me out. So I say root um PA55WRD. Don't save. Let me do this again. PA55WRD. Login. Uh, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Root. Um, 3296. All right. So root. If I do PA55WRD, why can't I log in? This is a new container, but I should be able to log in. Oh, sorry, I'm not putting in the root PA55WORD. That's the password. Okay, so I'm logged in now. So I want to show you, you can see that I don't have the TechNeed test database here any longer. And this ascertains everything we've been explaining in this course from the very first start, that a pod has ephemeral, that is non-persistent storage, and as soon as a pod dies, all the information in the pod disappears as well. And that's why you would configure persistent storage for your applications. And secondly, you notice that when I deleted the pod and recreated it again, PHPMyAdmin could connect back to my SQL, and that's because we used service as a medium of communication. If you are dependent on the pod IP, the pod IP is dynamic and would have changed when we recreated another one. Hence, we wouldn't have been able to connect to PHPMyAdmin seamlessly. So in the next lesson, we will look at how to add secrets and config map as a persistent volume to applications. So thank you for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. By doing that, you would encourage us to do more of this course. Subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thanks once more, and bye for now.